What's up, everyone? I'm Omar Jimenez. Standing ovation, standing ovation. You're too kind. I can't see you all, but I can feel the love. I'm a correspondent with CNN, and a little over 5 years ago, I was sitting exactly where you are. So this is weird for a lot of reasons. One, because if you'd asked me where I thought I was going to be 5 or 6 years after graduation, I wouldn't have said here. It's also weird because I'm in here, and you all are out there. I really wanted the chance to look each of you in your eyes in person and see if you're as badass in person as you are on paper. Seriously, you all have done something that's never been done before in the history of Northwestern. I don't know where you're watching from, but if it's not too awkward, round of applause for yourselves. I realize you might be in a room by yourself, but if you're with other people, high fives all around, hand sanitizer immediately after. If you're watching this, you probably just listened to George R.R. Martin and his remarks, which were great. But for me, that's a lot of pressure going on after someone like that. Like, what am I going to say? How can I compete with an accomplished legend like him? It got me thinking, and I settled on this. If you remember nothing else from this speech, just know you're going to be okay. As long as you're not as bad at life as the last season of Game of Thrones. To be fair, George didn't write that season. It wasn't based on the books. But that's because he's giving graduation speeches instead of finishing the books. We're waiting. We need more. In all seriousness, though, he's a legend. And we all know great work takes time. I truly can't wait. Somehow, though, I now have a feeling there's going to be a character that weirdly resembles me in his next book who dies in the most gruesome way imaginable. I probably deserve it. So, anyway, I graduated in 2015. It's wild because it wasn't that long ago, but I can already see how getting old happens fast. Let's be clear, I'm not old. Look at your parents and professors. That's old. But I'm starting to see how it happens. So enjoy today, celebrate, but also watch your backs because they start to chronically hurt a lot quicker than you think. Which, speaking of watch your back, I want to talk about this past year for a second. First, though, let's just breathe. I know it's been difficult, not just from a schooling perspective, but from a life perspective. I remember my team and I were the first for CNN to report on the ground in Kirkland, Washington on March 1st, 2020, outside a nursing home where we and others were monitoring a coronavirus outbreak. We were sent out there because the first known coronavirus death at the time had happened a day earlier. I packed for 3 days thinking, this will blow over. Not one of my better predictions. We're in a better spot now with vaccinations, but it's a sobering thought looking back. On an everyday level, it largely took us away from what we loved, friends, family, activities that usually bring us together as a community. But it wasn't just COVID. It was around this time last year we would have been a few weeks removed from my team and I being the first for CNN on the ground in Minneapolis, the morning after a cell phone video had gone viral of a man named George Floyd under the knee of the now convicted murderer, Derek Chauvin, for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. I don't have to tell you. It was an awful video. But as awful as it sparked a lot of important conversation, a lot of difficult discussions, not just in the public sphere, but among those closest to you. Your family and friends. For some, it may have been a wake-up call. For others, it was a sad reinforcement of what they already knew to be true. But for everyone, it was a confrontation with what it meant to be an American versus what it meant to be black in America. It's tough. My team and I were cuffed and detained by Minnesota State troopers while trying to tell that story live on television. And the police still made up a narrative. They had to verify we were reporters before releasing us from custody over an hour later. We showed our press credentials. We were on live international television, and you had my name. Google me. Got a Wikipedia page and everything, which you know isn't official, but somehow makes you more official. If the camera wasn't rolling, it would have been my word versus theirs for the rest of time, and it makes you question what happens when the cameras aren't rolling in communities all across the country with people who might not have the power of CNN, and in this case, the state's governor behind them. They're tough conversations that many of you may have been confronted with for the first time. But if you're like me, you've grown more this year than I think you'll ever realize. I'm only 27, and I'm supposed to be processing this on the world stage in a professional capacity, something that I guess I always knew was possible, maybe not probable, which is a powerful relationship. For those that don't know, I played basketball for the Northwestern team for 2 years. Well, played is a generous word. I was on the team. But at the time, I was also being a Northwestern and Medill student like you all, doing the exact same work everyone was, and fighting for the exact same internships everyone was, which was definitely the currency in those days. To give you an idea of what my life was like sophomore year, for example, that spring, I had just gotten a part-time internship with NBC, so what that meant was 3 times a week I was downtown reporting for my internship while in the middle of traveling the country for basketball season, trying to manage my normal course load and trying to manage having some sort of a social life. You all might be too young for this, but RIP the keg. If you don't know, look it up. There was one time I remember we played at Ohio State one night, went to the airport to fly back from Columbus after the game, flew back, didn't eventually get back to my dorm until a little after midnight, slept a few hours, woke up at 5:30 a.m. to get to my internship by 7, worked there until 3. I would nap in my car in the parking garage for an hour before driving back to campus where I had a late afternoon class, and then went straight to the library to study for the next day of classes. I don't know what I was thinking either. But it goes back to that relationship of what's possible and what's probable. Probable is, as you've probably guessed, what's most likely to happen, or in other words, what should happen based on a scenario or a given set of facts. The issue is, a lot of times, it's framed through the lenses of others, or in some cases, the limitations of others. The idea of, you probably can't do it because I've never seen someone do it, and what are the chances you're the first? And that's fair. But does it mean you don't at least try it? That's where the possible comes in. You want something, you don't quite know how it's going to happen, but you know there's at least an opening to take a shot at it. It's something I've stumbled into benefiting from my whole career. I remember applying to local stations in small towns my senior year of Northwestern, but just on a whim, I decided to email my reel to the general manager of a Baltimore station, someone I literally had one conversation with over a year ago at a dinner at that point. And the email wasn't even to work at the station. It was to see if he knew anyone that would like my stuff, because surely Baltimore was too big of a market to start out in. I remember I emailed in January my senior year, no response. Didn't really hear back in a serious way for months, so I focused on my other stuff, what was probable, the logical choices. But then all of a sudden, months later, I get a response saying they were interested in interviewing me. I eventually got the job, but I was a 21-year-old child, basically, walking into a city like Baltimore, expected to be as good as those that had been there 21 years. It took the help of a lot of people, but I started to figure things out. I worked the weekend mornings as part of my shift, and it was really just a 4-person reporting team. I was the only field reporter, 2 anchors, and a meteorologist. What I noticed was every time one of the weekend morning anchors took vacation, the managers had to call in someone from the weekday shift and force them to wake up at the ungodly hour of 3 in the morning on a Saturday and Sunday to fill in. I was super paranoid on stepping on the toes of veterans, so I went to the normal weekend anchors who I considered my work moms. They considered themselves my work moms before I did. One of them was a Medill alum. But I told them what I noticed and asked, what are the chances the big bosses would let me fill in alongside you all when you take vacation? Maybe? Logistically, it made sense, and they loved the idea, but there was the small issue of I'd never anchored in any professional setting outside of a college newscast, just a tiny issue. So for a few weeks in a row, they actually helped set up the studio after the show was over, and we did a few reads, basically to build up a pseudo-reel. And even after we did that, I didn't know exactly what to do with it. But one of my work moms put the footage on a flash drive with a sticky note that said, "Watch me," and put it on our news director's desk. I was horrified. I would have used a little more finesse, slide it in there. But I remember he called me into his office, and I was like, here we go. But he said he actually liked it. And while there were things I could improve on, he could also see a scenario where this could work. Well, eventually they did. And a year out of sitting where you are right now, I was co-anchoring the weekend morning news in Baltimore. Not because that was what was expected of me, but because I thought to myself, what if? And ran with it. Don't get me wrong, I would have been fine if I never did. but I ended up better only because I did. Fast forward to the end of my time there, I was at a conference and exchanged info with a few CNN people that actually remembered me from a prior internship. But after connecting at this conference, I would periodically send them my stuff because why not? I got little to no responses, but whatever. Realistically, I was focused on trying to move up in the local news world to places like Chicago and Philadelphia, but then all of a sudden, CNN called. They were interested in interviewing me, which I was 23 at the time, not much older than you all. I was just as shocked as you would be if you got that call right now. I interviewed with literally dozens of their people in 3 different cities over multiple months and eventually got the job, not as a national correspondent, but as a correspondent for what's known as CNN News Source, where I was one of 4 to 5 reporters with the jurisdiction of LA to Paris, responsible for covering only the biggest breaking news stories for local news affiliates that wanted to cover these things but couldn't quite send anyone to the scene. I mean, in one stretch in my second month there, I went from one Category 4 hurricane in Texas right to a Category 5 in Florida, then straight to a devastating earthquake in Mexico City. The next story I was deployed to was Las Vegas in the middle of the night for the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history, then to another hurricane and right into wildfires in Northern California. I'm telling you this because a 23-year-old, by all accounts I had ever heard in my entire life up to that point, was not supposed to be able to do these things. They got done, and I think I did a good job doing them, so clearly it was possible, just wasn't probable. Then it became this weird dynamic of, am I now the torchbearer for every young person? If I mess up, does this mean they'll never hire another young person again? I mean, kind of. There was more pressure because I was the youngest in the room on everything, on getting live shots right, on being able to travel, on being liked in the office, because up until that point, many of the people I worked with had a certain idea of what was possible for someone like me until I came around. And I couldn't help but think there were probably some waiting for a slip-up so they could fall back into their comfort of probable and say, see, told you so. What I stumbled into is when you're in that space, where people might be doubting you only because you're changing their ideas of what's possible, that's when you're truly in the sweet spot. You've changed what people's ideas of possible are, and over time, you mold it into the probable. Then, with each new challenge and step in your journey, if you're doing it right, you continue to push that possible forward. I mean, I was a year into the job meeting with a seasoned photographer to go shoot a story. They didn't know who I was, which was totally understandable. And when I showed up with my assigned intern, the photographer said, oh, wow, 2 interns for the story? Yeah, it's tough. By the way, I'm using age here, but this doesn't just apply to age. It could be race, gender, even what city you're from. Once someone gets an idea of what they feel is probable for you, it instantly becomes a limitation. In some ways, people smarter than me and my family knew this because I'm from the Atlanta area, from the South, and it's almost impossible not to pick up a Southern accent there. As much as I tried, my mom would not let me. Every time I'd say, I'm going for this, there would be silence, and then, you mean, I'm going for this. Well, yeah, you all are going to. It was the most annoying thing growing up. But I later learned my grandmother, an English professor, had done the same thing to my mom, who was now doing it to me because they recognized around the country Southern accents might imply to some that you're probably dumb. Whether it's true or not, it's an immediate limitation. The point I'm making here is whenever you do anything, someone has already made up their mind on what's probable for you, and you cheat yourself if you let that win. He's not supposed to be doing this. She's not supposed to be doing that. Good. That means you've tapped into something worthwhile. And for some, this dynamic means bigger shots than others. Maybe your possible right now is like it was for me at your point, trying to get a job in a top 50 TV market when your probable is Quincy, Illinois. Great place. Did my journalism residency there. Or maybe it's moving far away from home when all of your friends and family stayed close to home. Whatever it is, if you've ever even thought about wanting it, you should at least try for it. Don't get me wrong, this way of thinking is going to come with a lot of obstacles and disappointment sometimes, but those are just 2 elements in my mind that make resilience, which if the last year is any indication, you've already got a whole hell of a lot of. Now, This last part is a reminder within this whole mentality to every once in a while take stock of what you've now shown to be possible. For me, it's this. When I was a middle schooler, the first news coverage I remember seeing in any significant way was Hurricane Katrina. I remember not totally knowing what was going on, but that it was awful. And I remember watching CNN, specifically Anderson Cooper. Because of that, over the years, I kept tabs on his career and how he got to where he was. I studied his reports, and when I officially decided I wanted to do news, my career goal was to be at CNN, like Anderson Cooper, to do what Anderson Cooper does, hair not included. So fast forward, I get promoted from my CNN news source job to my current role as a national correspondent covering the Midwest for CNN. And I'm just starting to get settled in here in Chicago, checking out the office for the first time. I wasn't even supposed to officially start for another week. Then the phone rang. They needed someone last minute to jump into the studio chair to talk about an armed confrontation in nearby Missouri. So I rushed into the chair, scrambled my notes together, took a deep breath as the voice from the anchor crackled into my ear. It was Anderson Cooper. My first live shot as a national correspondent for CNN, a position I'd always wanted to have spanning back over a decade, was with Anderson Cooper, the inspiration from the start. It's one of those moments that when it's done, all you can do is sit there and go, what the hell just happened? In this case, the world showed me in a breathtaking way what can happen when you push the idea of what's possible. I never thought of that specific moment, obviously, but that opportunity, yeah, even if no one else did. I would argue me standing here is proof of that. I'm 5 years out from graduation and addressing the best journalism school in the country. That's not supposed to happen, but it did. And that's because I'll bet over time we've shifted a few answers within Medill of, oh, that would never work too. Well, even if it was because they couldn't get anyone better, I'll take it. I'll take it. Now, I'm not telling you these things to create any sort of pressure. You already have enough on you as it is. I'm telling you to show how deep and powerful this idea can become if you welcome it. That's the most Kylo Ren thing I've ever said, but it's true. There's no one path, but my path wouldn't have existed if not for some of the full court shots I was heaving at the basket. Don't get me wrong, I was still working on my layups, my mid-range, paying attention to what's in front of me, Euro step, but I wasn't going to step off that court without seeing if I could make a full court shot or two. Can't guarantee the shot will go in, but I can guarantee it won't go in if I don't ever shoot it. And sure, there was definitely some help and luck involved, but I don't know a single person that's gotten anywhere significant without help, and I'm a big believer in luck when it's defined as timing meeting preparation. I remember looking at all the great alums that have come before me, the Michael Wilbons, the Rachel Nichols, the Peter Alexanders, and more, and thinking to myself, that's where I want to be. And now, knowing this is where I wanted to be and remembering how this dream slowly became a goal, then a plan, and before long a reality, that doesn't come from limiting yourself to what's probable, to what people tell you your limits are. They don't know. Only you do. And you won't know unless you test them. Now, it doesn't mean ignore a great situation in front of you. What that means is see that great situation and at least take a shot for the stars, hoping you land on that cloud. If the answer is no, the answer is no. But if it's yes, now look where you are. So what I'm trying to say is, I'm not saying you can do exactly what I did. That would make it probable. But you sure as hell could do things that were never even possible for me, your own trail that you know you've taken every opportunity to blaze. You're already really doing it. There are a lot of you that might be thinking you didn't get the full Northwestern experience, which in some aspects is true, but what you really got was a Northwestern experience that no one else has ever had, and that's powerful. You threw out the probable and showed us all, myself included, what's possible. The resilience, the courageousness, the audacity to keep going. Your future journalists, media moguls, marketers, you're going to thrive in the moments that will inevitably become history, and I know that because you're sitting here on the tail end of one of the most historic eras in American existence, if not the world. You've achieved incredible greatness during your time at Northwestern. Honestly, I feel sorry for the classes that come after you because they're going to have to live up to the reputation and the power of the class of 2021. You did half of it with masks on, without even showing your full faces, which is physically true, but is also a metaphor for the fact you're just getting started. The world has yet to see your full faces. So work on your probable game, but don't you dare forget about the possible, no matter how impossible others tell you it is. I always think back to that Matthew McConaughey Oscars acceptance speech, and if you haven't seen it, he basically said his hero was himself 10 years from now, and I've always thought about that, because you don't become your own hero by becoming what everyone expects you to become. You become your own hero by becoming what you want to become. So congratulations, class of 2021. You've just made history, and personally, I can't wait to see what history you're going to make next. So shoot your shot, go hard when you do, and last of all, but most importantly, go Cats.